Welcome everyone to another Design Ops Align podcast. And today we have two guests on our show, which is very different to our normal setup in the Design Ops Align podcast. But I am blessed to have Javier and Nina on the show, who are going to be speaking about a very deep subject that's going on right now in our industry. And we are fortunate to have them give us some insights into what's happening in the job market at the moment. So welcome, Javier, and welcome, Nina.
Thank you, Yes. Thanks for having us.
Javier, Nina, would you like to give a quick introduction to the audience about yourself?
Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to start. My name is Nina Weber. I'm a user researcher and systemic coach. I have about 20 years of experience in the industry. And over the past several years, while working as a user researcher, I've started doing more and more coaching with colleagues. And I realized at some point that I'm enjoying that so much that last year I decided to quit my job and to go full-time into coaching. And at work, I've been following around Javier through various different teams because I enjoyed working with him so much. So when he approached me with the idea of founding Astrolabium together, that was a complete no-brainer for me. And so this is what we're doing now, career coaching and training for UX and tech professionals. And Javier might want to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Javier. I am a UX director, UX research director. I've been managing scaling research teams across different products over the past 14 years, mostly with Nina and my team. And yes, I quit my previous job and started now together with Nina Astrolabium. And yeah, we're focusing on coaching and training UXers, helping people in the industry who both have a strong passion for helping others. And so this is a good way to combine our passion with what we do day to day. And that's why we're excited of doing this trip together.
Yes, I'm going to go straight in. I'm really just going to go straight in with this podcast. You have chosen to take up a business where the industry at the moment is really dire. I'll give you my 2 cents from doing the Design Ops Align podcast and speaking to a lot of designers. They're losing a lot of hope in the industry at the moment. It's really tough. Even for people like senior or mid-level, they're struggling to kind of move up in the chain, or there's no budgets inside of design teams, and juniors are struggling to get in. And I wanted to get your 2 cents on this. How are you finding the market at the moment?
Yeah, the market is bananas right now. There's no other ways to say that. It is really difficult because a lot of companies have engaged in widespread layoffs over the past 2 years, and that has flooded the market with professionals. And I want to emphasize here that it is not a UX specific thing, although many UXers think about it that way because they see their own piece of the cake, and then that's why they think, oh, it's a UX thing or it's a design thing. But we know people like of all kind of disciplines, engineers, PMs, PGMs, that are in the same situation because the layoffs have not been targeted at one discipline. They have been across the board. So the market has been flooded with a lot of people that have a lot of experience and good education, and they're competing over the existing jobs. And that means that it's much harder to get traction when you submit an application. It's much harder to then survive the interviews because the competition is so high. And that means it requires a lot of stamina and a lot of patience and a lot of kindness to yourself to survive in this market. And that's across all seniorities. So there's obviously junior people are struggling, but like mid-level, senior, I'm working with director level folks 30 years in the industry who are in the same situation. So it is across the board, for everyone the same. And that is new because tech has been very blessed and in a bubble for the last couple of decades where finding jobs was really easy, right? A lot of other industries have been in similar situations for many years, but in tech, we've been accustomed that the jobs would drop from the sky and you could choose from different ones, and that's no longer the case, and so it's really difficult.
And it's also difficult for people in jobs, right? That also means the same situation means that there's much less flexibility for the people who are in jobs to grow, to move, to get promotions, to change positions, to go into different teams. There's much less willingness on the side of the employers to make like exceptions for people, to create new roles that would be a better fit and would benefit both sides. Really, there's just not enough pressure on the employers right now to concede in any way, and so people in jobs feel the same kind of the same effects of the market, and they feel stuck in inflexible roles, unable to grow. And that with the additional effects that come from layoffs that we're seeing everywhere, right? Where people lose coworkers on the one side, where teams shrink but have the same amount of work. And where the psychological effects of like not knowing whether you're still going to have a job the next year are not really contributing to people's happiness right now. So the market is tough both for people who are looking, but also for people who are in jobs right now.
There's so much for me to dissect from what you just both said, and I'm going to take it in chunk by chunks. And one of the things I notice, especially I would say over the last 2 years, and there's been a lot of talk about this in social media, is the ghosting aspect that comes with job hunting. Now, I want to get your 2 cents because I've had somebody on the show before who was talking about this subject specifically. And she mentioned that ghosting has now become a norm inside of this job hunting industry, or this formulation of job hunting, that being ghosted is actually part of the norm. And I wanted to get your 2 cents on this. Do you think that people that are going to be looking at jobs are going, well, what would you say to people that are going to experience this as they start doing their job hunting?
So as a sociologist, I need to jump in here. And I feel
Go
like
for it.
if we use the term norm, right, like I feel it's hopefully not becoming a norm, because even recruiters say this is not really something they want to do, right? It is happening. It is something that people need to expect if they are in the market. We know that people don't hear back in a lot of cases, and there is ghosting happening. Assuming that this is a new norm would assume that this is okay from the perspective of employers. And I think most employers are not doing this because they think it's normal or it's good or it's okay. They do it because they are overwhelmed and they don't invest enough time in making it better. And that's a poor signal. That's something that I think employers need to get better at. But most recruiters that we talk to still say the expectation on the recruiter side is also that there is a communication, that like there should be feedback coming to the applicant, even if they're rejected right out. Like there should obviously be no ghosting, right?
This is something that we mentioned in the podcast. I think a lot of people are misinterpreting the terminology of ghosting.
Yes.
Like when I was applying for jobs back in my day and I didn't get a reply, that for me is not count as ghosting. What I'd count as ghosting, imagine you've actually had an interview and you've spoken to somebody and you don't hear back. That's when I count as ghosting. Even if I spoke to the hiring manager or the recruiter and I didn't hear back from them, for me, that wouldn't be counted as ghosting. It's only when I get through the next stages that I start speaking to people in the team and they don't respond. That's when I get that.
So you're spot on. If you send in an application and you don't hear back, that is not ghosting. It's still not good practice. I still believe a company owes you at least an automated rejection notice. Thank you for submitting, but we have to prioritize other candidates, right? That's not ghosting. I think the moment you have had personal contact with someone on the company side, that moment, if they suddenly break up the communication without closing the loop, that's ghosting, right? That's
Yeah.
when they're like, and that can happen at all stages. It's crazy. I have spoken with people who have been ghosted after signing the contract. You have to imagine that, right? It's like, so that practice is inexplicable to me, because as a recruiter, if you want to do a good job, I would expect you to have at least a minimum standard towards yourself, to have a pre-canned answer that you send someone if the communication is terminated, right? And that is not a lot of work. And if you don't do that, I don't care what kind of recruiter you are, you're not a good one, right? But apparently, I don't think it has become a new norm, but it has become something acceptable amongst recruiters to do that, right? And I don't really understand why, and it's making people miserable. And one of the things Nina and I do when we work with people on job search coaching is to help them understand they need to focus their energy on things they can control. And ghosting is something they can't control, right? And the moment they start commiserating and start like, why is it, and sending another email and another email, right? And another ping, and then putting it on LinkedIn and saying, I am being ghosted by this person, how can that be? And so on. That's a waste of energy. It makes you even worse. You're commiserating and in something that is difficult already, instead of using that energy to energize yourself and recover and then move on applying to other jobs.
It's such, I got to play devil's advocate when people come on the podcast, and there's a lot of people flooding into the market, but then how can recruiters spot those diamonds in the rough when there's like 600 applications going through their system day in, day out? Now, we got to be sympathetic to these recruiters in some sense. The ones that have bad practices, we're not sympathetic to, but the ones that that are just flooded, how can they see the diamonds in the rough?
And I think it's really important to kind of like pause for a second there as well, because
Sure.
the market now is also forcing recruiters to adapt really quickly to something that they are not used to, right? Some years ago, a large part of their work was to actively seek out challenge and to seek out talent and to find it, right? And now they open a position and they get, as you said, flooded. I don't like these images so much because we're talking about people here, but like in terms of applications, they get huge amounts of applications for an open position, and so they are not used to dealing with that much either, and they have to adjust their strategies. And what we are discussing with people who are in the process on the other side, applying for jobs, is that they need to empathize with that. They need to understand what it looks like on their side, and they need to realize that they have a window of 5 to 10 seconds to make the recruiter realize this is a good match to the position. This application should go on the good pile. So what they're doing there is triaging. They're going through thousands of applications, and they bin some of them and they put some on a maybe look at it later pile. And you want to get on this is the good pile. These are the people that we're going to call back pile, right? And so what you have in terms of agency over that stage is to make sure it is as easy as possible for the recruiter to spot this is a match between this opening here and that application here. So what we say is you need to tailor your CV. You have a core CV that has all of your information, but then you make sure that you use the exact title that is in the opening and you change your CV to reflect that same title, again, to make it easy for the recruiter to see, yes, this is a match. You look through all of the requirements in the opening and you look for where do I meet that? And then you highlight that by using the same language, for example, that is in the opening. So you need to adjust maybe the words that you're using to describe what you can do to more exactly match what they are looking for, to make it really, really hard for them to not see how good a match you are. So tailoring each application and spending time on making sure that it is as exact a match as possible to the opening, and making that information visible within this very, very short window of time, within 5 to 10 seconds, that's what candidates can do in order to, increase the likelihood of getting to the next phase of the application process.
Would you say? Sorry, Javier, go.
Yeah, I wanted to add something here, which is recruiters, because you asked, like, what can recruiters do, right? Recruiters use some hard knockoff criteria, they call it, to remove people from the pile, like things that, like, it's a black and white decision, right? So for instance, they will say, like, I don't know, needs at least 5 years of experience, you have less, out the pile, right? We want someone that has a work visa, so they remove everyone that requires sponsorship, right? We want somebody that works like on site, so if you are only willing to work remote, you get removed. So these kind of things recruiters use to, like, also filter out things. And that's something that candidates need to understand on their side. It's not good to apply for jobs where you're not a match, right? If the job is in Seattle and you are in Michigan and you are not willing to relocate, you should not apply to that job, because you're making it harder for everyone. And also, you will get a lot of rejections, right? Which are, people think they're free, but they're not. They wear you down. You still invest time in applying that you could invest in something more helpful. So we need to move to a place where people go back towards applying to jobs that are a match, that are a realistic match. So recruiters get less volume of low quality applications, and then you can spend more time looking at the ones that are an actual match to find the diamonds, as you call it.
Yeah.
And that is a real problem right now, that people are. LinkedIn has made it so easy to apply that click is so cheap that they go, like, yeah, I can apply even if I'm not a match, right? And that is making it hard for everyone.
Javi, I was just about to mention this. Like, a lot of people do what they it's a English terminology. We call it spray and pray. So you apply to 100 applications, or you apply to 100 jobs on LinkedIn, on stuff. And as you mentioned, they're not the right match for it. But a lot of people do this spray and pray method to see what really comes back. Now, would you advise people not to do the spray and pray method? Like, what is the key things of not doing a spray and pray?
I absolutely advise against the spray and pray, or the spaghetti at the wall method.
Yeah, I heard that one.
Exactly. Because you're making it hard for everyone, but you're also wasting your time, right? So yes, people should apply to many positions. You cannot apply to just a few and think you will be successful. So you need to apply to as many as you can, as long as they are a good match for you, right? As long as they match your profile, as long as you think I have realistic chances to get into the process there. So looking at the job posting, match, like doing like a sync with your profile, seeing is that a match, is it or not, is it a stretch, maybe I can try it still, or is it a clear no-go? Doing that, and then once you have decided, okay, it is a potential match, doing what Nina described with tailoring your materials and so on, and then sending in a high quality application, ideally on the company website, not on LinkedIn. If they offer that, do a quick search and then go to the company website and apply that way, because they get better. The recruiters say they get better quality submissions through their company website than on LinkedIn. And then doing this, investing your time in that, time boxing it, right? We say, like, don't spend more than half of your day searching for a job, because else you get miserable. So spend half of your day sending in high quality applications, track them, and move on, and leave the ones that are not a match to the ones that are a match.
And I think one thing that's important to note here is that application is the second step already. There's a step before, which is clarifying your profile, understanding what am I bringing as a UX professional, but also what am I looking for, right? So that matching becomes easier. What roles do I want to even apply for? And a lot of people, especially after layoffs, they're desperate. They are
Yeah.
so shocked that they start applying right away. And my recommendation is always sit back first. Like, you need to breathe first. You need to first clarify what are the next things that I want to do. Who am I at this point? Instead of going from, until now I've worked as X, so I'm looking for X, or I'm looking for whatever sounds great. Think about really, who are you as a UX professional? What skills do you have? What gaps do you have? Do you need to fill any of those gaps to have better chances to get the next position that you want? But also, what am I looking for? What are those things where I would say that's, as Javier said, from the recruiter side, they are knockoff criteria, right? Do I have them as well? Like, how flexible am I on different points? A lot of people in the initial phases don't really have good answers when they meet with a recruiter as well, because they haven't really done that work. Even if they get a call back, they might fail the interview with a recruiter because they can't really tell a story about who they are in this initial contact. So not skipping this step and taking time to clarify and define oneself is a really important step that should not be omitted.
Both mentioned about tailoring your CV. And now in our industry, we have the portfolios. It's the biggest topic in our industry. It's what represents us. And I'll give you my 2 cents. I can be right or wrong. And that's the whole point of the podcast. I always believe that your portfolio should show a certain skill set. Now, I'm from the old school generation. I don't want to give away my age and show my gray hair, but I came from the specialists. We moved from a generalist to the specialist type of era. So we had dedicated UX and we had dedicated UI designers. Now, people that are doing this, people in this industry right now, or having to do up their portfolios. And as you mentioned, they can quickly change stuff on their CVs to match a job requirement. But what would you say about their portfolios when it's something that's kind of like, hey, I've been doing design systems and UI design and knowing front end coding, and my portfolio's purely on that. There's no UX side of it. And the same from a UX designer, they've been doing grayscale wireframes, information architecture, et cetera. What would you say to people who have specialized portfolios in this industry right now?
So the portfolios are also something that can be tailored, but it's obviously more work, and there's you need to be careful with how deep you go there, right? So the portfolio shouldn't be tailored at, I don't know, like a very granular level, but there are many people have a lot of experience and they have a lot of projects to show, and you cannot have a portfolio with 10 projects. Like, one of the things we spend time working with people is like, you need to pick 1 to 3 projects that show your process well. And and there should be complementary to each other, right? But now if you have 10 projects because you have been in the industry for a long period of time, right, and you are applying to a place where they require design system experience, right, and that is not part of your normal portfolio, but you have that prepared, or you can prepare it, you can send in a portfolio to that particular job where you show the design system work first, and then maybe to other projects. And that leads me to to one of the questions, which is the question about how do you present your portfolio, right? Because a lot of people obsess over the question, what tools do you use? Is it a website? Is it a presentation? Is it whatever, right? I don't think the tool matters, but there are tools that will allow you to tailor your CV more easily than others. If you have a presentation, a slide deck that you transform into a PDF, you can link to that particular PDF from your CV that you send in, right? And you can easily tailor and have different versions for different applications. You have different PDFs. If you have a website, you're screwed.
That's it. That's exactly where I was going to aim at. Because I came from the portfolio generation where it was a website. So would you suggest people not to have a portfolio website?
I stay away. I stay away from suggesting tools. I just say, like, think about like how likely is it that you're going to need different portfolios for different jobs. If you're very junior, you only have 2 projects to show, you might not need that because like you cannot send in different projects, right? If you're more senior, you might be in that situation, right? So if you can pick a tool that allows you to have different versions of portfolios, no matter what the tool is, I would certainly prefer that over the static one where you're like kind of doomed with always the same portfolio. That's something to think about.
And for me, just like to go back on the term specialist, right? So I still think that route towards specialization and like landing on one track, for example, research versus design, is very much true and necessary, right? We also see people who say, well, I actually can do both, right? I'm a designer and a researcher, so I'm applying for both roles. And that's where I say, go back to stage one. Like, you need to know what your profile is, what roles you're applying to, and you need to make sure that your portfolio reflects that. Flexibility in your portfolio is fantastic if it means you can highlight certain skills that you have in your specialization in a different order. But I've also seen portfolios where somebody talks about like research they've done and then they talk about UI stuff. I'm like, this doesn't really paint a clear picture about who you are. And that means you're going to come across as not relevant. So going back to stage one, where you define who you are as a UX professional, what your broad specialization is really still key before you start writing your CV and your portfolio.
I love that you said that. I've had loads of people come onto the podcast where, you know, they've said I was a UX UI designer, and you know, I'll say my 2 cents. I personally believe the industry has been diluted with these UX UI designers, and we've lost that kind of specialization in those specific roles. And this is why a lot of product managers, or how should you say, a lot of businesses are starting to cut down on these type of specialist roles because of these kind of, how should you say, jack of all trades and master of none. So I'm really glad you pointed that out. I want to also backtrack onto, again, this whole website portfolio. One of the key things I always notice about portfolios is that it's your moment to shine. And it's, you know, we come from a design field. A lot of hiring managers are not UX specialists, you know, or design specialists, but they know what they like and they know what attracts them. And this is what I wanted to get your 2 cents on. A lot of portfolios have that wow factor, has that animation, shows all this like really cool stuff, but none of them have any kind of business context behind it. Now, let me give you my 2 cents in this. I came across a portfolio where they kind of showed, oh yeah, I've done all these kind of micro interactions and animations. And we all know from working in enterprise solutions, micro interactions is the most hardest things to bring into a software solution or into software. Now, what would you say to people who are going to build these type of website portfolios? Would you suggest that they show business context on anything that they've designed to then stand out from the crowd?
Take a
I'm
stab
happy to take it.
Again, if you put yourself into the shoes of the audience of this, right? This is going to be a hiring manager, and what they are trying to do with a portfolio is to understand, how does that person fit into my team? If they were presented with the problems that I'm facing, that I hope the person that I'm hiring is going to solve for me, right? How are they going to proceed? They can't know that before they do it, but they can glean the methodology or the approach that people take to similar problems from the portfolio. So having the messiness in there, having the business context in there, having the constraints in there, having the stuff that comes up like mid-project in terms of additional requirements or additional constraints, showing that this happened and how you handled it, is actually, to me personally, much more important information than the shiny end product. Like, everyone can take a screenshot of whatever published product is out there and say, this is what I've been working on. But working in the industry, we know it's never like a single person who's launching something, right? It's always a team of different people, and there's always discussion. And I know that this is going to happen in my team where I'm the hiring manager as well. So I want to know, what can I expect from that person? How can I expect them to go from problem to multiple different solutions? How do they decide what they're going to look at to narrow down to a specific solution? And I want to see that entire process, not just the glossy outcome. Actually, the glossy outcome is, in my opinion, the least important bit of the entire portfolio.
Yeah. But it's as you mentioned, you know, hiring managers or recruiters are flooded. So, you know, once, you know, as Javier said, you start to cut down, okay, permits, location, ways of working, etc., etc. You're then left with a whole bunch of pile that can only grab your attention for 5 seconds. Now, obviously the CV, you know, you've tailored that. So now you've gone down to even a smaller list. And then you go into what they, you know, wherever they're going to show their portfolio in. And again, it's that attractiveness through a website portfolio that you get differently from a PowerPoint slide. And again, it's when you start going further into that, it's then the business context. So there's a lot of hurdles for designers to jump through. And then it ties into this comment I was just that I want to make. A lot of people get through that process, as I just mentioned, all those different steps. And then the last step is domain knowledge, you know. And us as designers, and we all come from a design background, we all believe that we can solve any solution through a design methodology. But they're still having to jump that hoop on domain knowledge in order to get the job. Now, what would you say to people to get how can I put this in a better way? How can they get over that hurdle of having domain knowledge?
Right now, honestly, they can't. Right. So in the past, when there was a scarcity of talent and an abundance of jobs, companies would hire for transferable skills. And you're right. So you would say, as a designer or as a researcher, right, I can do research for anything, right? Like it don't matter. Like it's the same methods. I just need to adapt them, and I will learn about the domain, and then I'll do it. And so people would be hired on that basis that they have the core skills. And the domain knowledge was less important. Nowadays, with so many people on the market, companies have moved towards using domain knowledge as another knockoff criteria, right? So it's not only location and salary expectation, all these things. It's like, does the person have the domain knowledge? Did they work in travel? Did they work in finance? Did they work in health, right? And if a company is doing that because they can, right? Because they get so many applications that they actually can require people to have a domain knowledge in health, then you're out. And if you don't have that domain knowledge, it's going to be much more likely that you're going to be rejected. Doesn't mean you can't try, right? But you have to know, compensating for that, if the company decided they want that domain knowledge, will be very difficult because you don't have it and you cannot pretend. You can obviously always fine tune some things, like make them sound a little more like, emphasize, like, for instance, I know you have experience in enterprise research, right? But it's not exactly in finance, it's something else. But then you rephrase it, you make it sound a little bit financy. You can do that, right, to a certain extent. But at the end, they will look for the domain knowledge they want, and then screen you out. And that can happen at all stages, because I've been working with people who went through last interviews and then got the feedback, well, we go with this candidate because they have 2 years more of experience in e-commerce, right? And what can you do?
Yeah, it's about transitioning into a field that is not what you've been doing before. Not so much about like, there's an opening now and am I applying for that or not? But if you're trying to transition, for example, from health to travel or vice versa or something, the tip that I'm giving now, as opposed to some years ago, I would have said, just go for it, right? Focus on the transferable knowledge and go for it. And that might have worked or would have worked. Now, the recommendation is to look for opportunities to get your feet wet while you're in your current job. Like, do volunteer work, do find opportunities in your current job to do something that is in that direction, or find lily pad opportunities. So find jobs that are somewhat in the middle. So if you want to go from health to tech, for example, find something that's health, but like with a tech thing. So you're somewhere in the middle, and you can use the knowledge that you have already, the experience that you have already in that space, while slowly getting more exposure to the other side as well. And that's, again, it's tough, and it requires people to be patient and to think longer term, rather than expect that they're going to have their next gig or their dream gig next quarter, which is just not working out that way anymore.
So on LinkedIn, we see a lot of people, coaches, career coaches, and, you know, as you say, job advisors, or general, you know, general people trying to help people find jobs. And one thing I notice a lot is, and, you know, it's my 2 cents about this. You know, again, I can be right or wrong. I find that a lot of people on LinkedIn give this false promise: I will find, or give a guarantee, we will find you a job. Yeah, I can see already where you know, and I want the audience to know this. I want people who are listening to this podcast, you know, to not fall into the trap of following coaches who are going to charge you a lot of money and give you guarantees. Now, I want to take it on the premise of astrolabium. Now, what do you, well, I wouldn't say guarantee, but what do you offer to people that are in the situation that are looking for jobs as some form of guarantees from your perspective?
We can't offer any guarantee. It would not be serious. In general, I recommend people to stay away from people that promise very strong promises. And that is not only regarding coaches that are telling you, okay, I'll guarantee you find a job. It's also like, you know, when you read these things where it's like, if you want to find a job, then stay off of LinkedIn. You have to go all through networking, or vice versa. Or like, you can only get a job if your portfolio is on this particular tool, or it's on Figma or whatever. Those things are not helpful. They might help to create a lot of clicks for those people, but it's not helpful in the process, right? Finding a balanced approach is typically a good way to go. What Nina and I do is we help people in the job search process from the beginning, like creating the CV, the portfolios, tailoring it, then like interview training, like mock interviews, analyzing interviews they did, mock presentations, improving, like looking at their design exercises, helping them improve that. So along the entire process, we can inject our knowledge into that, because together we have spent like almost 40 years in hiring people. And so we have seen a lot, and we have talked with a lot of recruiters, so we know about the process, and we can infuse that knowledge in the process of interviewing. And by looking at the entire process from the beginning, from application to offer stage, and understanding the different stages, understanding how well you convert between the different stages. So how often do you go from application to a screener call? How often from a screener call to a hiring manager interview? We can try to understand where you might have a problem and then focus the energy on that. Okay, you're not converting from hiring manager interview to panel interview, right? So apparently something that happens in that interview isn't going well, right? Let's do a mock interview. Or why don't you record your interview and we analyze it? We tell you here and here it went sideways, right? By doing that, we will increase the chances of you getting an offer at the end, but there's no guarantee. And the best way to understand that is there are people who are in the problem of a work visa situation, right?
Yeah.
So they do need visa sponsorship. And there's nothing we can do about that, right? And when I talk with someone like that, I tell them, I can work with you on everything, right? From the application to the interviews to everything, right? But I don't think this will help you to get a job, because the work visa situation I can't solve for you, right? So are there other ways you can find job in places you're allowed to work, right? Like, let's strategize about that. So and that just shows that nobody can guarantee you a job. It's not serious to do that. What we can do is just like say that we will work hard with you on trying to increase those chances, on making sure you have your house in order. Everything you do is as good as possible, right? And if it doesn't work out, there's many factors that lead to this, such as competition, jobs opening, closing, internal filling, whatever it is, which are out of your control. But at least you know you've done everything you can from your side to make it happen.
And that goes for all kinds of coaching, right? That's not just with regards to finding a job. That's all kinds of career coaching. The coaching means the work is done by the coachee, not by the coach. The coach helps them on the way, but obviously they don't have full control over what is happening outside. And so any kind of guarantee in coaching is completely dubious.
Yeah.
And just because we're on the topic of like people selling on the desperation of job seekers, right? There's also, I just want to segue that here because it's fitting. There's also a lot of services of people that are trying to abuse the desperation of people in the situation where they send out hundreds and sometimes thousands of applications over the course of a lot of time without hearing a lot of response. And there's this myth around AI, applicant tracking systems, and AI are responsible for people's CVs not going through. And so there are very dubious services out there that are offering to optimize your CV for AI or for ATS. And they charge you money to do ridiculous stuff to your CV, and that's completely wasted money. Like we've talked to recruiters about how ATS and AI in ATS is used in the moment, and there's absolutely no reason that suggests that doing anything for ATS is a good idea. You should design your CV and your portfolio for humans who are reading that, and anyone who is offering you a guarantee to improve some kind of score that they are inventing, or improving your chances of getting a call back by making your CV ATS compatible, is basically ripping you off. So
What does ATS stand for?
the ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System, and it's basically just short for a system that companies use to get applications in and then to manage that applicant throughout the entire process until the end.
Database.
It's a database. It's a customer management tool, basically.
Oh, okay. Nina, I want to backtrack. Actually, what you just said a second ago, but also what you mentioned before, desperation.
Mhm.
You know, it's one of the key things that happens when somebody loses their job. You know, especially if you have families and you got to put food on the table. And it's the first thing that comes into people's mind when they lose a job, the desperation to just get their CV out. And you mentioned to take a step back and take time. But what would you say to the people that don't have that breathing space to do so?
Yeah, it's a sucker, but you have to create that space. You're not going to be fast if you're rushing. That's just not something that works. And I know, yes, you need to have an income. For many people, it's also an issue with a visa situation where they need to find a job in a minimum amount of time. My recommendation there is still take time to understand who you are and where you want to land next, and then do the quick thing on the side where you just find any job. And it doesn't have to be a job that's part of your career, right? There can be any kind of job. For example, in the US, I think you have 3 months or something to find your next gig. And so instead of trying to rush into the next UX job, just take a job that is easier to get. And that can be something like, we've worked with people who've been working at McDonald's then, and that's a job that still allows you to stay, right? While you're taking time to, on the side, continue the work on your career, which means clarifying your profile, finding the right fit in terms of job openings, tailoring your applications, and going through all of those motions while you are in a stable job that's not part of your career that you don't need to mention in your CV later on as well.
So Javier, you wanted to mention something.
Yes. So there is something unintuitive about this, which is similar to work-life balance, right? So you have somebody who works themselves to the bones to do a lot of work, and they think that is the way to do a lot of work. And what they don't realize is that because they're getting exhausted, the work quality and the work quantity is sinking. And so they continue doing this, and because they're getting less efficient, they're doing more and more and more until they break down and they have a burnout. For job searching, something very similar is going on. I've worked with people who, after getting unemployed, like laid off, immediately went into job searching frantically, sending out CVs, having interviews and stuff, didn't get a single offer because they were in such a bad state of mind that they were not able to convince an employer that they're actually a good fit, because interviewing is hard. You have to be at your best when you do that. You have to be really good, right? Present yourself well, your work, and like be charming and like socialize, and like people should feel that chemistry, they want you, right? How will you do that if you're actually not doing well? You cannot pretend that. So people think, okay, if I take some time to think about what I want, to prepare proper materials, and then if I take some time to search for a job, but also take some time to rest and be kind to myself, spend time with family and friends and so on, that they will be slower if they do that. But I disagree with that. It's the same with burnout, right? If you are rested, if you take time to rest and sleep and eat well and be healthy and work out and do stuff that energize you, you will be much better in your job. You will produce more work and better work than if you work yourself to the bones. And people don't understand that it's like, it doesn't work that way. You can just not like put everything in there and expect everything to come back if you don't have a balanced approach.
Enjoying the content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
I'm going to ask you a mystic question. Now, it's a bit off topic, but do you believe that your energy that you have within inside you, so if you have an energy of desperation, it will come across in your application, in your interviews, in your stage-by-stage process? Do you believe in that?
Sent. I don't know you, Nina, but you can feel it.
This is something that's actually, there's data on that. Like, we pick up on how somebody really feels, and authenticity is such a huge topic, right? Like, you can't. So desperation is something that people shrink away from.
Yes.
It feels uncomfortable to the other person, and so that puts you in a disadvantage. If you're trying to cover that, humans have very fine-tuned senses, and we feel if somebody is just faking it. That works for some people in some instances, but especially in an interview process where you go through multiple rounds with different people, somebody's going to pick that up and is going to let you fail, right? So being able to sit in a conversation at each stage of the process, knowing what you bring to the table and knowing your value is super important in order to make the other person, I'm going to say, like you, because that, as stupid as it is, it shouldn't be necessary, but it is, right? Like, if we don't like someone, if we don't feel comfortable with someone, we're not going to rate them as well as we would in the other case.
But Nina, sorry, Javier, did you want to say something before I ask this question?
I can add a small thing here, which is a phenomenon I've seen now multiple times, which is interesting. So when I work with somebody on improving their skills, do a mock interview, right? And so do mock interview 45 minutes, different questions, and then I give feedback and do a debrief, right? And most of the time, a lot of the interview was actually good, right? And so I tell, this was really good, here you need to polish on this, here you need to take care of that, right? And after that, they feel, you can tell, like, they're bigger on the screen, right? And they're like, oh, right, this makes me feel so good, right? Because I realize I can actually do that, right? Because I've been worn down by bad experiences and so on, right? And very often they go into the next interview and they pass, right? And I didn't really teach them a lot, right? I taught them a couple of things to improve, right? But the pure fact that they had this interview and that they realized and somebody told them this was actually good, because nobody
Yeah.
tells you in the interviews, right? They only send you a
Yeah.
rejection and that's
Yeah.
it. That helps, right? And so that's all on these like very like fine signals and things that like we're complex human beings, right? And it's like
Hmm.
very small things can have a huge effect. Think about placebo effects in medicine, right? Very small things can have a huge effect. And so yes, you bring that negative energy, that desperation into the process. This is going to be hard for you.
It's such a hard one, Javier. Imagine you've gone to so many interviews and you're just getting knocked down left, right, and center. You're in desperation because you got to put food on the table. You're falling behind on your bills. You could lose your flat or house. It's such a hard thing to get that mental mindset to positivity when there's so much negativity around. Now, what would you say to people who are going to be in this situation now? We're going to be watching this podcast.
Personally, I don't have a silver bullet. If I would be one of those coaches that gives you guarantees, right? It's awful. It's brutal. Like Nina and I, we can just give like these like ideas on how you can improve, right? Like Nina said, maybe you can do another job that is not in UX while you're looking for this other job, or maybe you have this contract freelance thing that you're not excited about, but will put food on your table, right? There's like for people who don't have a work visa, say like, well, maybe you can go back to your home country and try to get a job at an international company that has an office in the US. And so after 2 years, you can apply for an within company transfer. So it's a longer term thing, but it's not no forever. It's not for it's a step that you will perceive as a step back. But so we can work on these kind of like things that make people feel better and be more calm. But there is no drug they can take and then everything is fine, right? It is that's the thing with difficult uh, phases in your life, right?
Yeah.
They're difficult for a reason, because they're not easy, right? We can't solve them magically. So it is all about being conscious about that,
Mhm.
about being conscious how you use your energy, how you recharge, how can you be kind to yourself, and realizing I will be more successful if I have a more balanced approach than if I'm just desperate.
And for me, it's also talking to other people, right? Like one
Nice.
reason why Javier and I are doing a lot of open door events, like this kind of podcast, is because we want people to understand it's the market to a large degree, right? It's fundamentally different from what you might have experienced the last time you were looking for a job. And getting only 10 to 20 replies on 100 applications that you send out is normal. You're doing okay if you're in that range, right? Like even if you don't hear back in 70 cases and you get rejections from 10 others, you're still doing okay. That is just the market right now. And so that is one thing, like talking to other people to understand, am I the only one who's experiencing this, or am I actually just like experiencing what everyone else is one thing that helps. And the other thing is also making space for those emotions. Even if you know that the market is shit right now, and sorry for saying that.
No, fine.
Um,
It is.
It is.
You're still going to have those moments where everything becomes too much. The pressure becomes too much, right? You still have no solution. You feel out of control. You feel like you have zero agency. And it's okay to be down in those moments, and find someone who will listen, who will be there for you to vent and to commiserate with you. But make sure that's not LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the worst place to talk about your shitty experience with the market, because future employers are going to read that as well. And as bad as it is, ideally you want to be able to bring your full self to your next employer as well. But with the market being what it is right now, you do need to do a certain degree of branding and of filtering what future employers see. So do not use LinkedIn to commiserate and talk about like how horrible that last recruiter was or whatever. That's not the place. Find some place outside of LinkedIn, best in person. When those feelings are there and need to be acknowledged, absolutely do that, but don't do it publicly.
I'm going to ask you a very hard question, and obviously, you can take your answer. And a lot of people are going to be watching this podcast, ranging from juniors all the way to directors. Now, from your experience, and you both have such great experience working in great enterprise companies, from your knowledge and experience, what is a good junior portfolio? I'm going to ask you for 3 stages. So I'm going to ask you for the junior portfolio. What do you think makes a good junior portfolio stand out from the rest? Just, and again, it's not a guarantee kind of question. I just want to get from your experience and knowledge, what would you think makes a good junior portfolio?
A junior portfolio that is successful right now, unfortunately, is a junior portfolio that doesn't look too junior, that actually has some experience in there. And that's super tough because hypothetical cases do not cut anything. So it needs to be actual experience. And that means something that I, like 3-4 years ago, told people not to do. It means you will have to work for free in some cases just to get that experience in. Work for small businesses who don't have a budget for UX. Work for an NGO or a non-profit around the corner. There are so many opportunities to discover, like, this is actually a problem that I can solve, and work with the people. Again, going back to the question about portfolios before, you don't want to show an end product. You don't want to show that you can theoretically improve Google Maps and make it look better than it looks right now. What the hiring manager is looking to see is, how do you work with real life constraints, real life requirements? And if that is the non-for-profit around the corner, the dog shelter where you live or whatever, that's much more valuable than a hypothetical exercise. So unfortunately, even as a junior, you will need to compete with people in the market who have experience. So your only chance is with a portfolio that has some degree of experience in there, even for entry-level positions.
I want to add to that, internships are very valuable there. There are students who do internships multiple, and they have a significant advantage over the ones that don't. So if you're still studying and you still can apply to internship positions, that is a really good way to show real experience in your portfolio, right? So try to do that. I would say it's even better to stop your education for a year and do a decent or 2 internships and then finish it up. Than go powering through without an internship and then coming out of your degree with no experience.
What would you say to mid-level to senior level portfolios? What advice would you give?
For mid-level and rather senior people, I mean, it's showing the process is obviously always key of your portfolio. Showing different type of products, ideally, so it's not the same, right? So maybe it's enterprise, maybe it's consumer, maybe it's in health or in finance, like, so different applications, different type of users. Different challenges, such as a redesign versus a 0 to 1 product. So if you can show different aspects of how you have applied skills in different settings, that is going to be much stronger than you showing the same over and over again. So ideally, if you have 2 to 3 projects, they show different facets of your skills in different applications. That is like for the more like the mid-level. The more senior ones, I think it's always scale. As you become more senior, you scale your work across more. So you will expect to see people showing examples for where they did bigger stuff with more people involved, maybe other designers working on it, different disciplines, more challenges and ambiguous problems that they're tackling. So not a small feature on a product, but like bigger efforts.
And just because you only said it in a side note there, don't overload the portfolio with too many projects. You want to show all of that, but within 2 to 3 projects. Even if you're more senior, people on the other side don't have more time to go through that stuff. So you still need to be concise, and you don't want to overwhelm them, and you don't want to make information get lost just because you're not showing it in a succinct enough way.
And so my last bit would be, what kind of advice would you give for portfolios for that kind of management to director level?
Yeah. So it's important to have in mind that managers and directors are obviously in charge, like the captain of a thing that happens, right? And it's in the design space, product design space, right? So some people feel like, oh, I can't show that because I didn't design it myself. And that is just not true. You can still show it because you made it happen, even if you didn't push around the pixels, to paraphrase a little. So showing the entire effort on how you made it happen, how you navigated ambiguities, how you clarify things, how you compromised, how you pulled different resources to make it happen, right? And what the outcome was, the success metrics, all these things, and that you were basically the captain that steered the boat, or one of the captains that steered the boat, is important. So I would say it's not about spreadsheets. Like, nobody's impressed with your spreadsheets at that level, but it's obviously, I made this big thing happen, right? Or I transformed the organization into being more UX centric. How did you do that, right? I built these programs to make research more efficient. Like, what were these programs? Even if you didn't do the legwork, obviously. So it's at that kind of level where you have to navigate.
Nina, you want to chime in that one?
I think Javier said it all there.
It can't be a podcast without talking about AI. I guess, we're in the midst of this, and I want to get your personal views and opinions. Are we just seeing the first wave of layoffs and cuts that are happening due to the fact of AI? Or do you think these cuts are happening because of AI from your point of view?
The cuts are happening because of AI, but not. Yes, no, they are. No, we know because we were told. So the cuts are happening because of AI, but not because AI is eliminating those roles or the need for those roles. The cuts are happening because companies are cutting costs to invest it in servers and data centers to run AI, right? Because AI, unlike other developments and changes in the industry in the past, is extremely expensive, right? And so you have to build up new data centers, and that was communicated that way. It's like not that way. They say like, oh, efficiencies to invest in new opportunities, which is the same. So right now, the layoffs are mostly due to companies creating resources to invest in AI. If there will be a second wave of layoffs that are because AI is actually taking over some of our jobs and eliminating the need for it, I can't tell. I think there's some disciplines that might be more vulnerable than others, right? Some disciplines might be more easily replaceable by AI than others. Personally, I do think that most of the AI stuff is pretty dumb. And I do think there will be a phase where companies recognize that a lot of the things actually can't be covered by AI. I recently had a conversation with a hiring manager who said that they're not investing in any program managers. So they're not hiring any program managers because program managers will be redundant because of AI. And I do not believe that. I do absolutely not believe that.
Yeah.
And I think those companies will come around and realize that their stuff is falling apart because nobody is actually orchestrating it. So I do think there will be AI is like still in the hype phase, and there will be a phase of where the market will realize, oh, there's not that much money in it that quickly. Like, it is actually really expensive to do those things, and then it's going to go down back to, okay, which problems can we solve with AI in a reasonable way? And those are the ones we need to invest in. And so, long story short, I do think there's maybe going to be more layoffs because of AI in the future, but I can't say in which disciplines, in which areas. And I also don't believe it's going to be massive. But I'm a notorious optimist.
I'm another optimist here, but I think the other thing that we're seeing also is like AI is fantastic in some ways, right? Like, we can use AI in so many ways to make our lives so much easier than they were. And they can take over a lot of things that we're doing that is grinding and that is not fun. And in a lot of cases, that's work that oftentimes falls on the shoulders of more junior people. So there's this notion of program managers, but also SWEs, software developers. The more junior levels do a lot of work right now that can be replaced with AI already. And I think there's going to be more that's going to replace work that is done by junior people in other roles right now as well. But what we need to consider is that if we don't have junior people anymore, we're not going to get senior people anymore because they grow on the job, right? So to me, it's more a question of like, how can we use AI in a way that's smart and reframe, redesign the junior level roles using the time, the time saving functions of AI and whatever we get from there, but still keeping those paths to the more senior levels open, because we cannot function, as Javier said, without the more senior people in the company who have learned through the more junior ranks, even doing stuff that now can be replaced by AI, going to a place where they cannot be replaced, because creativity, collaboration and communication as well, all of those things that we learn on the way, that's not something that can be taken over by AI in the moment. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I don't see that happening right now.
Do you think it's going to be, and obviously this is just speculation, but do you think it's going to be a needed skill set to know how to use AI? And, you know, right now we've gone, well, that's my opinion, I could be wrong. I believe we've gone past the generative AI phase, and we're now in the agentive AI stage. Do you think people that are now coming into this industry, and you mentioned juniors, a lot of work is going to be done by juniors, but juniors that are going to be coming into this industry or trying to break into this industry, do you think it's going to be a needed skill set to know how to do prompt engineering as part of your day-to-day workflow, from just speculation?
Not so much prompt engineering. That might be something that you will have to be able to do for a certain amount of time, but I think that's something that's in flux, right? That's changing. So that's not something that I would focus overly on. But understanding AI, like understanding what the capabilities are and getting a feel for where it makes sense and where the limitations are, that's absolutely something that we need to understand in any kind of profession, but especially in tech.
I agree, and also especially because if you're working on a product, right, you are trying to solve problems, and sometimes AI will be the right answer for that. And how will you know if you don't know anything about AI, right? So it has always been part of UXers' jobs to understand the technologies and the developments in the field, to understand how it will impact our experiences. Imagine when we moved from desktop to mobile, right? You could not say, do you really think it's necessary for designers to understand mobile? Well, yes, because you're designing for that, right? The same is for AI, right? You're designing for and with AI. And so how would you do that if you don't know about it? So I think that's important and has always been part of UX, to pick up on the latest trends and understand them and learn about them. So yes, that's these are important skills that people should bring, both on how it impacts their work. So how does AI help a designer design better, or a researcher do better research, as well as how can AI be used to improve and solve problems that users have.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm really, really glad, because a lot of people who've come to us, we always mention that you should study some form of AI UX patterns, because it's now becoming a trend. A lot of applications are built with those AI UX features. And I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. Well, not only just solving a problem, but also taking it into some form of design context, learning about latest trends. And as you mentioned about learning mobile, a lot of people have come to us and say, hey, look, there's loads of resources for AI UX patterns to start bringing into your workflow. So we're coming up to the last bit of the show, and I would love the audience to know, when is the best time to come to Astrolabium from your perspective?
Now. What do you mean?
Wait, well, okay, I'll give you my 2 cents. I'll give you my 2 cents. And I'll go back to the portfolio thing. Most people don't use their portfolio unless they need to find a job. So I found my job and I don't touch it for like 2-3 years. I even looked at my portfolio the other day and I haven't touched it in like 3-4 years. Now, when is the best time to really utilize Astrolabium in their career or generally looking for a job? What would you say is from your perspective?
Maybe it's important to emphasize here, like, we are not doing only job search coaching. That is something we are doing right now because a lot of people have the need for it, right? And we're here to help. But we do career coaching, which is actually that you have a coach while you are on the job that helps you with different things you're facing, right? Maybe you want to figure out which is the next step to go. Maybe you're facing a communication issue, a problem, a toxic situation in your job, right? Maybe you're not happy. Maybe you're about to burn out, right? So we work with people on the job to help them navigate their career. That's why we're called Astrolabium. And so that can always be helpful. If you're thinking about changing jobs, you have one, we can help there too. And obviously, if you're unemployed too, so it's along your career, no matter what stage you are, whenever you feel you can need help from someone else, I can highly recommend it. I have a coach myself. I have always had it. It has been super helpful along my career. And so then they can reach out to us.
Yeah. So just echoing that, we offer coaching for tech professionals. We offer trainings also for UX professionals, specifically about like how to be more impactful in your job, how to make sure that those non-technical skills that, in my opinion, are at least as important as the technical skills, namely communication and collaboration, how you can make sure that you weave them in a good way throughout the entire process, the life cycle of user research, to make sure that your research actually impacts product development. So that's stuff that we offer all the time. Going back to your question about like when people should be working on their portfolio, because I think that's a really important question, right? You should be working on your portfolio when you're on the job, when you still have access to all of that information that you need to feed into that story that you're telling about your process. Once you're gone, especially after you've been laid off, you might lack very important pieces of information that you then will have to make up or whatever, will not be able to show in your portfolio. While you're still in the job is also a great time to get feedback from people that you've worked with, that you can include in your portfolio, and start making sure that you have a network that carries, that you're going to need also when you're not in the job anymore, either because you're in a new position or like the second position after that, or because you're out of a job and you need that. So while you're in the job is actually the best time to start working for when you're not in that job anymore, both with regards to portfolio, to your career development.
And I want to add something here, yes, which might be a little bit controversial, but I feel strongly about it. People who know me know I have strong opinions. I think we might be moving towards a place where you have to be looking for a job constantly.
Okay.
I think one of the problems that many people have been caught off guard with the layoffs and stuff, they were not prepared for it. They had no experience in putting together the materials, no experience in interviewing and presenting and everything. And if one thing, this layoff phase, one thing we have learned out of that is that employers are no longer reliable partners, right? We can be laid off anytime for any reason, just because. And that means if we can't trust them to provide us job security, we need to be always prepared to look for a new job. That means likely this is a good idea to be applying, even if you have a job you're happy with, once or twice a month to an interesting role, just to be warm, just to get in there, just to interview. And maybe, who knows, you like the job and they even pay better and you go, right? But that way you'll always stay updated. You'll be forced to update your portfolio, your resume, right? You will still be warm when interviewing. You will know how to do that. You will get that experience. So you're not being caught off guard in the case where your employer puts you on the street.
And we talked about the psychological impact, right? The desperation that comes from those situations as well. It's much easier to train that when there's nothing at stake, when you are confident in yourself, when you haven't had that terrible experience of somebody deciding that you're expendable, but can show off as who you are without that looming over you.
I've got two more questions I wanted to ask you both. And you mentioned about keeping a portfolio updated. Now, what advice would you give to people who have NDA restrictions on their work?
Happens often. You need to obfuscate certain things, right? So people sometimes get blocked with that, and they're like, I can't show anything. Well, the important thing that you need to show is the process, right? Very often the end user interface or certain numbers and things that are not that important. So you can blur stuff out, you can change. In one case, I had a researcher who solved that really well, who changed all the numbers on the charts and said, those are made up numbers, right? But the chart shows the direction, right, of the insights. So obfuscating, blurring stuff, saying this is under NDA, can't share, put stuff behind a password wall. Like if you have any NDA, certainly don't put anything on a website. Like if you have a PDF, it has a password, so it's limited. You can control how it's shared. But at the end, you need to be able to show how you worked, right? The process. And so sometimes people are too strict there, and I think it's better to try to push the limits and see like how much can you show without really breaching any confidential information.
I think that's really important. Like, look at the NDA. Don't just assume you can't share anything, but like make sure that you understand what actually is like off limits and what isn't, because oftentimes those are pretty lax. You can show more than you might think.
I'm glad you mentioned that one, because we tend not to read those NDAs, to be honest. We just know there's an NDA and we just get frightened, and we're like, and also it's the fact that a lot of people don't ask the question to HR or to their managers, because it puts them in the light that, they're putting work on their portfolio. They are looking. So a lot of people are scared about that as well. So my final question, you mentioned you help people from juniors and you also help people all the way up to director levels, but do you also help people who want to, as you just mentioned, Javier, you got to be constantly looking for a job. You got to be constantly on guard. Do you also help people who want to go into that freelance market, as well as on the end scale who want to go into the consultancy or start their own business market?
So we don't currently help people create their own businesses. We could maybe in the future, but it's not part of the portfolio right now. And to a certain extent, if people do freelance or they do work as contractors, there's also some interviewing involved there. So obviously sometimes we help there too. But no, the main focus has not been that, or at least not for me. I don't know you, Nina.
The client who ended up doing that, but that wasn't what he set out to do. So that we were working on clarifying goals, but it wasn't. It was more about him understanding what was the next step for him, and it turned out that was the step more than the setting up of that part.
Yeah, because the reason it wasn't to try and catch you out. I have heard a lot of people are just struggling to get into the market. Purely, as you mentioned, Javier, having an employer is not secure no more. So a lot of people are starting to move into that freelance market or consultancy. At the end of the day, they're both the same with different terminologies. And then so that's why I'm just noticing that a lot of people are taking the bandwagon. We're probably going to see a lot of people move into that freelance market as time goes on. So
I agree. I mean, you see different things, right? Some people are taking it as an interim step while they're looking for an employment. they can't find it that quickly, and so they do some freelancing to pay their bills. There's other people who are leaving the field to do other stuff because they have been grossed out by the layoffs and by the current way like companies are treating their employees, right? So there's different motivations for it, and I'm sure that the competition, that field is also like, take only like coaching, right? I mean, there's a lot of people offering coaching now, right? So the competition is high, so there will be a phase of where people try, and then some of them might phase out again and do something else. So I think that's natural when these kind of shifts happen in the market.
Well, look, we're coming up to the end of the show, and I'll leave some space for you to speak to the audience. Like, you know, what advice would you give to them right now? I'll leave some sentences for you to kind of speak. So, Javier, do you want to say something?
Absolutely. Well, so I speak now to the people that are in the job markets. It's important for you to realize that the difficulties you're experiencing are not your fault. Like, don't doubt your own skills, your own education, your own experience, right? You're awesome. You have a great career behind you and ahead of you. The current situation has not been caused by you. And even if it's very difficult, you're getting a lot of rejections wearing you down, right? Don't doubt yourself, right? This is going to get better. We know nobody knows how long, but it will get better. And so don't stop believing in yourself, and the rest will come into place.
Amazing. I love that one.
Follow up.
Go for it.
I'm going to then have a message to the non-searching, to the people who are in a job right now. And I think, just speaking about my own experience here as well, it's like so important to go slow sometimes. We're so used to just delivering and thinking about the next deadline and like everything that's on our to-do list that we forget ourselves and checking in with how happy, how satisfied we are with where we're going in the moment, whether we even know where we're going. So making time for yourself every now and then to check in, how am I feeling about everything that's going on right now? What is in my life and what is missing in my life? Super important. Take time for that.
Amazing statements, really, really amazing statements, because I think it resonates with a lot of people who are just feeling this pressure at the moment. And I can't thank you enough, both of you, for coming on to the show. It's probably our longest podcast to date, because we normally keep it to 40 minutes in Design Ops Aligned, but there's so much to dissect in this topic at the moment, and a lot of people are going through it. So thank you both for coming on the show.
Thanks to you, Ness. This has been fun. And thanks for distributing this knowledge through the networks and trying to help people. Really appreciate that. We need to stick together in this difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're both doing is absolutely amazing, helping people in this situation. So, Nina, did you want to say something?
Just community forward. I love it. Thank you so much for having us.
No, thank you. And we're gonna put the links to Astrolabium in the show notes. Put your links to your LinkedIn profile. And we will love anyone that's watching this podcast. So please reach out to Javier and Nina. As Nina mentioned, speaking to people is important. If you are going through tough times, there are people out here like Javier and Nina to help you. You know, as Nina mentioned, it's a community. We are all going to go through this, and they're both there to help you in this situation. So please reach out to them when you can, and we'll love to know how it's gone on and how they've helped you. So please comment below in descriptions or in the show notes when you've watched this podcast. And yeah, love to know if things are brighter on the other side for you after spending time with Javier and Nina. So thank you both.
Thank you, Ness. Bye.